I was 68 years old, standing in my own driveway on a grey Tuesday in March, holding a letter that said the Sterling Oaks Homeowners Association could put a lien on the house my late wife and I paid off 22 years ago. Not because I'd broken a law, not because I owed a bank a dime, because I wouldn't take down a flagpole I built with my own two hands the week I came home from the army for good. But let me take you back to where this started. My name is Frank Milligan. 23 years in the Army, airborne infantry, deployments to Panama and the Persian Gulf, and a retirement ceremony in 1999 where they handed me a folded flag and I made myself a promise I never told a soul. I raised 3 kids in the house on Birchwood Court. I held my wife Carol's hand on that same front porch the morning she passed, 6 years back. Every day since I got home for good, I've raised that flag at 0700 and lowered it at sunset, folded 13 times, set on the shelf by the door. Carol used to tease me about the folding, like the flag might come apart if I skipped a single one. I never skipped one, not even the week we buried her. And on the first of every month, rain or shine, I made one more stop downtown before I did anything for myself. I never told anyone why. I didn't know, that winter, that a new HOA board was about to decide my flagpole was a problem. The new HOA president was a woman named Denise Carver, 11 months into the neighborhood, and her first act in office was a beautification initiative. New rules on shutter colors, mailbox styles, and yard structures. Buried on page 4, no freestanding flagpoles over 8 feet. Mine was 20, poured in concrete, standing since 1999 through 4 different boards and 2 decades of neighbors who never once complained. This board didn't call. They mailed a violation notice. 30 days to remove it, or $50 a week until I did. I wrote back. I explained what the pole meant, offered to have it inspected for safety, offered anything but taking it down. Denise's reply was one line: rules apply equally to everyone. The fines climbed, 50, then 100, then 250 a week. In June, a board member staked a red and white sign in my front lawn, the kind you'd use for a lost dog, except this one said violation in letters big enough to read from a moving car. Neighbors slowed down to look. A few laughed. At the July meeting, when I stood up to speak, Denise cut me off. "This isn't Arlington, Mr. Milligan, it's a subdivision." Somebody in the back row clapped. "A flag is just cloth until somebody dies for it. After that, it's not decoration anymore. It's a debt. And a debt like that doesn't care about zoning rules or property values. It just wants to be paid every single day for the rest of your life." By September, the fines had crossed $4,000, and the board voted to file a lien on my house. My son Mike drove up from Columbus and sat across my kitchen table with his head in his hands. "Dad, it's a flagpole. Take it down before they take the house." I understood why he said it, but I'd made a promise on the day I retired that I was never going to break for a homeowners association newsletter. That night, I lay awake doing math I hadn't done since Carol got sick. What a lawyer would cost, what the fines would cost, what happens to 3 kids' inheritance if their father loses a fight over a flagpole. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I stopped doing math and just listened to the house. 27 years of creaks I knew by heart. I wasn't about to let a mailed notice from people who'd never worn a uniform decide what happened to it. So I did the only thing left to save the house. I pulled every dollar I had out of savings for a lawyer, and on the 1st of October, for the first time in 12 years, I didn't make my stop downtown. No envelope, no 3 words written on the front in block letters. For Danny. I needed the money for something else now. 3 days later, Loretta Bird, who ran the Millbrook Community Pantry, called my house. She wasn't calling about the lien. She said an envelope hadn't come for the first time in 12 years, and she couldn't cover the Petrov family's heating bill or the Hendersons' medicine that week. She told me she'd wondered for a decade who, for Danny, was. Same handwriting, same 3 words, first of every month, going back to a winter when 3 families in this town nearly lost their heat. She said she never asked around because whoever it was clearly didn't want to be found, but she'd seen my photograph in the Millbrook Gazette that week, standing next to a red violation sign, and she asked me quietly, "Frank, is it you?" I didn't answer right away. When I was overseas on my last deployment, Carol was home alone with 3 kids, and our furnace went out in January, and not one neighbor came. I swore if I made it home, no family on this street would ever sit that cold alone again, not on my watch. Danny would have wanted somebody to keep it going, I finally said. It just couldn't be me, not this month. Loretta never had to put my name on the pantry fund in the paper. In a town of 6,000 people, that kind of thing finds its own way out on its own. The flagpole story didn't need any help either. By the next week, half of Millbrook knew everything, and this time a local TV crew was parked outside the HOA office right alongside the Gazette. The board called a special meeting for the second week of October. Mike drove up again just to sit beside me. When we walked into that same meeting room, there wasn't an empty chair left. The Hendersons were there, the Petrovs were there. Loretta stood along the back wall. Denise Carver had to stand at the same podium where she'd told me back in July that this wasn't Darlington. Somebody in the crowd read her own words back to her, straight off a phone. The room went so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Then she read the board's new ruling out loud herself. Every fine rescinded, a permanent exception written into the covenant for flagpoles installed by military veterans. And before she'd even finished the sentence, Loretta stood up. Then the Hendersons, then the Petrovs, then, row by row, every last person in that room, until there wasn't a soul still sitting except Denise. Nobody was looking at her anymore. Every face in that room had turned toward the back, where Mike had his hand on my shoulder, and the applause built until it filled the whole room, for me, not her. Denise stood there holding a piece of paper nobody was watching, set it down, stepped away from the podium, and resigned from the board before the meeting even adjourned. Nobody stopped clapping long enough to notice her go. The next morning, 2 board members drove out to Birchwood Court and pulled that red violation sign out of my lawn themselves in full view of the whole street and left without a word. By the weekend, 3 more houses on Birchwood Court had flags up on their porches. Nobody asked them to, they just did. I never flew that flag to be seen. I flew it so I'd never forget the ones who didn't get to come home and fly one of their own.